Welcome to Always Ageless radio show. I'm your host, Valerie Van de Zilver. Here we dive into the vibrant, dynamic world of living life fully as a mature adult, whether you're an active, aging adult, whether you are the adult child of aging parents. We are your go-to source for inspiration, practical advice, and heartwarming stories from anything to do with experiences, and we also interview amazing adults who are doing incredible things in the later years of their life. So please stay tuned, join us, stay curious, and we will help you through this journey that is interesting, fun, and productive. Make sure you have a safe life. This isn't a show for the old, it is a show for the bold. Welcome. Welcome. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Jan White. I'm so pleased to have her here with us at Always Ageless. For those in our viewing and listening audience, let me just share a brief little bit of background. Last week, I was fortunate enough to attend the annual conference of the Certified Senior Advisors at a beautiful resort in Phoenix. Now you might say, yeah, sure, Phoenix in August. Yeah, it was a little hot, that's true. But it was beautiful. The sky was blue, the clouds were white, and the palm trees just stuck up against the blue sky. It was absolutely beautiful. And across the room came this beautiful lady with pure white hair. And I was fortunate enough to meet her and knew that she would be a great host or guest for our show. So Dr. White, we are so glad, honored to have you with us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much. So tell us a little about what your experience and what brought you to the world of seniors. What was it that happened in your life that brought you to becoming interested in the seniors portion of our life?
Well, I was actually recruited into gerontology by a department chair, Fort Hays State University. And she just thought it would be a great career. And she kept calling me and hounding me about this gerontology program. And I finally asked her, her name is Dr. Leanne Connolly. I said, why are you calling me almost every day? And she said, well, you're on the honor roll and I'm going down the list. I want people in my program who aren't going to cause me a lot of problems. But in all of these conversations, she really sold me on the program and she told me that gerontology is a great career and with all the aging uh, population. And so that's how I got into it. And I love it.
And what were you going to school for prior to this?
Well, it was a general studies human services degree. I wasn't really interested in working or having a career. But the more I got into my studies and learning about aging and the older population, and we don't know a lot about aging. Really, this is a new field.
It is.
I just got hooked. I thought this is for me. This is what I want to do with my life.
Well, certainly you have been a blessing to this field because you're someone who loves, I can tell from the little I know about you so far, that you love research, you love learning, and you love sharing your knowledge with other people. So we certainly need more people like you in this field. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, I am a real curious person, as are all scientists. And so this just was a perfect fit for me.
Yes. Tell us, where does gerontology start and being a doctor stop, or the two of them? I'm sure those cross somewhere, but tell us about that.
Right. So a geriatric physician or a geriatrician is a medical doctor with a specialization in the older person. I am an academic. I have a PhD. And so gerontology is the study and research of aging across the lifespan. And it's biopsychosocial. So it's the biology, the sociology of aging, and the psychology of aging. All of those go into the aging experience.
And are there, and people who have that certification or that designation, are you all private practitioners?
No. Now, the large majority of us are academics. So research settings like at the NIH or at some big research institute, or we're teaching at the doctoral level. Some of us, like me, did both. So I was teaching, researching, and I had a practice in Huntsville, Alabama. And I actually worked with clients. I really wanted to do that. Now, the biggest difference is I had clients, and of course, a geriatrician would have patients. There is no credentialing in gerontology, believe it or not. There's no licensure. So if you want to set up a practice and work directly with clients, you need to have a PhD. You really do. You need to have the extra knowledge so that you understand all of the nuances of the aging process.
And then you received your degree. And where did you go from there?
Well, I got my master's degree, was in human services with a specialization in gerontology. And then the whole time during my master's program, I had cancer.
Oh,
And yes, and so I was
oh, I'm
involved
so
in
sorry.
treatments. But I was in a virtual program at Fort Hays State University, and it was one of
Virtual.
yes, it was virtual, and it was one of the first ones, and it was accredited. But it was just a perfect fit because I could take care of my mother in Nashville. She was 100 miles away and she was in failing health. I didn't
Oh,
have to move. And this was back in the day where the virtual program, we had VHS tapes sent to
oh,
us
those big fat
every
ones,
quarter.
right? Yeah,
Yes,
big. They were
yes.
big like this, and yeah.
Yeah, they were big. And so the classes were recorded on the VHS tapes. And it was just, it was wonderful. So then I decided after I graduated with my master's, I decided to open up my practice and it was humming right along. And I thought, you know what? I survived cancer and I'm just going for the PhD because if I can get through cancer, I could do that PhD. Now, the PhD was the hardest thing I ever did in my whole life.
Is that right?
Yes,
And
that was
you're
very
pretty good at
intense.
studying too, so I would be surprised that was hard for you.
Well, thank you. It was a challenge. It really was.
And so then you hung up your shingle and you had a private practice.
Yes, I had a
And this
private
this was in
practice in Huntsville,
Huntsville.
Alabama. Yes, and it was really rewarding because I got a lot of referrals from um, physicians in the area, and the referrals were a lot of times for a battery of memory assessments. Oftentimes, they would refer the older child, the grown child who's a caregiver, to come and talk to me about caregiving because they were experiencing burnout. But a lot of my clients were came on their own. They saw my ad and they would have concerns about memory loss. And so I not only administered memory assessments, but I also did driving assessments too. So a lot of my referrals were from physicians for those driving
So
assessments.
tell me, what is a memory assessment? I think we all think we're losing our minds sometimes.
Yes. Well, older adults are hyper aware of every lost key.
We are.
And a lot of times their children, their grown children will, tell them, look, mom, you're losing it. You need to go get checked. And so they would come to me and because now we have memory assessments as part of a comprehensive exam for Medicare, but back then we didn't. So they would come to me and I would not only administer just one assessment, I had a whole battery that would give me a clearer picture of if there were deficits, what type of deficits. Usually everything was fine. And what amazes me is that people do not realize that cognitive slowing is normal. And so and losing a key or losing something is normal at any age, but they're hyper aware of it when they're older. and they fear the worst.
Sure. So do you do an assessment of someone, and what are the things that you see that tell you they do have a deficiency or they don't? Now, I know you said that cognitive is slowing isn't normal, but how do you see that? How do you tell?
Well, cognitive slowing, which is again normal aging, think of your brain as a computer, an old computer. An older computer is going to have less, the retrieval time is going to be longer than with a brand new computer.
Right?
And it's the
That's
same
true.
way with the brain, the brain is older, and but the thing is, there's more files. There's more files to go through.
That's
So
true.
so your brain is, looking through these files for
Mhm.
these memories. And so what I would usually find is that people might have, you know, trouble retrieving the information, but they were cognitively intact. Really, very few of my clients demonstrated any deficiencies.
And
Most of
if
them
they
were absolutely fine.
and if they
Now,
did,
if I
yep.
found someone
Mhm.
that had results that were not, optimum, then I would refer them to their physician, their primary care physician, because there are about 20 different conditions that mimic dementia. So that was the next step. Hopefully they have something that is treatable and reversible, like a vitamin deficiency, or even
Oh,
something as simple as dehydration can mimic dementia.
really?
So that was the next step, was go to your PCP and get a complete workup.
So people would come to you and say, I can't find my keys. I think I've lost my mind. And
Right. Or my adult children tell me that I'm losing it and I need to come and see you and have my memory checked. And
and
sure,
how do you check someone's memory?
well, it's a matter of administering different types of assessments. So one of the most common is called the MOCA, MOCA. It's the Montreal Cognitive Exam. That is an excellent starting point. And then, of course, we have the MMSE, which is really kind of overused. And so those two, and then I had about 5 or 6 others, and I would change them up. And that would give us a baseline, because every once in a while I would have someone come back the following year, and so we could do a comparison.
Oh,
So
okay.
that gives me an overview of what is going on. But like I said, usually everything was fine.
And are there a lot of gerontologists who have private practices like this?
No, the majority of us don't. The majority of us are either in research or we're teaching. But I wanted to work with clients. I really
Sure.
did. I found a gap, and I thought this was a great thing for me to be able to take this expertise and work one-on-one. And I didn't understand why people weren't doing this. Well,
And,
I found out there just aren't enough gerontologists to go around. There really aren't.
and do you think that's changed over the last several years? You think there are more
Yes,
people who are doing this?
yes, there are more people interested in serving the older adults. Well, that was indicative of the conference we just went to.
Yes.
There is a real hunger for working with the older population, and that I can see that the stigma is being reduced somewhat. And I'm just delighted that so many people are getting into these businesses like caregiving. And we even had a company, a moving company
We
that
do.
specialized in packing everything up for
Yes.
people, and all kinds of new challenges, new companies for people who need these types of services for the aging population. It's really a great time to have a business.
It is a great time. And um there's something else, well, I'll hold that thought for a minute. So
Okay.
tell me, I've seen you called an aging authority.
Right. Yeah,
Is that
that's
something?
sort of my tagline. And
Okay,
I really wanted to get that authority in there because I want to distinguish between a person who is selling something and an aging expert. So I, with my experience and my doctoral degree, I am an aging expert. I have no product to sell. Now, there are people out there, uh, online primarily, and they self identify as a longevity expert or an aging expert. And oh, by the way, they have these products to sell, and they have a lot of times they have books to sell plus their products. And those are not aging experts. So I had to make that distinction that I am a legitimate person because there is no licensure in this field. So I had to really emphasize that.
and I've also seen you called a life transition coach. Tell
Yes,
us a little bit more about that.
yes, because so many of my clients would come to me for a consultation and that had to do with retirement and relocation. And a lot of times they were being pressured by their grown children to relocate or maybe add on say a granny flat in the back of the house.
Right.
And they were just in a flux and they were getting all of this advice from different directions and they didn't know what to do. So we would sit down and sort everything out. And I often used genograms, which are diagrams, support diagrams, and to help them figure out their direction. Now, usually these geographic moves don't usually work out. And I would try to emphasize that because, an older adult who makes a long distance move and gets into a totally different environment with their family, there's no turning back.
That's true.
That
Once
is a
they sell their house,
huge
that's it. Yeah.
that is a huge decision and it's very, very costly. And often they will agree to sell the family home and get rid of all of their things, most of their things, and then move into a smaller environment, either in the home of their grown children or
Right.
nearby in a smaller environment.
Mhm.
Now, what happens is your grown children will move on you.
Yes,
They get
that
another
could happen,
job.
couldn't it?
Yeah, they get another job opportunity or whatever. This happens time and time again. And so it's so important that when you're faced with this type of a decision that you really think this thing through. You have to look at every element of this decision.
And this is really important because we go through all these stages in our life. We're born, our parents are, in their growing years and managing their life and raising their children. And then we can't wait to get out on our own. But then we get to a certain point, don't we, where now we all have to work together. And we have to work on something that's so sensitive and so difficult. And sometimes we feel like we have the right to tell our parents what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And
It's
and
right.
it's the only time in our life when we all really have to work together as a family unit.
Yes, you're exactly right. And it's especially problematic if the older adult is moving in with their son and his family. It's different when it's a daughter and her family. There's
And
a
how is
different
that?
dynamic.
How is that?
Yes, because a daughter-in-law will not be so receptive as a daughter to having her parents live with them. So the daughter-in-law is thinking usually, well, not only am I now taking care of my mother-in-law, but I'm probably going to be taking care of my parents too. So it's the only time it's really successful, well, usually, is if it is with a daughter. But there are so many dynamics that are involved, and so many older adults have been left behind in this new location, and then they really have no life. And having your social network around you is critical to successful aging. So then there's their social network that is in the other location they just moved from. So yeah, it's a big decision.
It is difficult. And I see in Facebook groups and some of the people that we're associated with now, who you see these couples that say, okay, I worked my whole life and I'm retired and now I'm taking care of my aging parents. And
Right.
I'm retired, so I can have my own retirement life. And I don't get to do that because now I have aging parents to take care of. So the role of being the adult children of aging parents is it is a role. It exists.
Oh yes. And sometimes the children have an agenda that isn't spoken about, but it's still there. So they're often controlling their inheritance, or they want a built-in babysitter. And not every grandparent wants to sign up for that. So
Yes,
you just have to be very, very careful. And I would urge the viewers and the listeners to work with a professional on making this is a huge life change, life transition. And that's why sometimes I call myself a life transition coach.
another thing that I see is when the adult children seem to feel that now all of a sudden they have the chance, the right to tell their parents what to do and to treat them
Yeah,
like children.
it's called bullying.
That
there's oh there's
could
there's a
be the
lot of
case.
this. There's a lot of this, and I've actually spoken to groups, and uh, I've urged the older adults to advocate for themselves, to speak up. You can't just have a passive voice in this. You have to be able to speak up and defend yourself, and have some answers and say, hey, look, this isn't memory loss. I don't have Alzheimer's. This is cognitive slowing, and it's normal.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Or simply just age. And being
Right.
age doesn't automatically make you, number one, it automatically doesn't make you old. Second of all, it doesn't make you helpless. And third of all, it
Right.
doesn't make you someone that wants to be old and helpless.
Right. You're not lesser than, and your intelligence doesn't diminish. You're still the same person. It's just that you're not moving as fast and your recall isn't as fast. So we just have to allow a little extra time. And, we don't get meaner as we age. That's an aging myth. Our personality stays the same. So there's a lot of these expectations that are really related to ageism.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. I noticed that you had a television show, or you told us
Right.
that earlier. Tell me about your television show. What was it about? Was it a weekly show? What did you talk about? Who was your audience?
Well, this was fascinating. I was asked to come on a live morning television show in 2003. Now, this was a WTZT in Athens, Alabama, but they had a viewership of 250,000 households all
Oh
over the Tennessee Valley.
my
So the
goodness.
viewership was huge. I went on one time. I talked about gerontology because the host had never heard of a gerontologist. And I talked about aging, and I talked about it in layman's terms. And it was a hit. And so I kept getting asked to come back and come back. Anyway, I wound up being a weekly guest on this live television show. And what I did, I would scour the research, the current research, and I would convert that into layman's terms and compress it down into 5 to 8 minutes. And the host would ask me questions, and I would bring this recent research to the viewers. And there was a big hunger for this. This was information they didn't know. And oftentimes, what I brought to the viewers would be in 2 weeks later, the lead story on CBS Evening News, for example.
Oh,
So, because I was digging it out of the current research.
sure.
And my gosh, I didn't realize how prevalent my presence was until I remember I was working for the certified senior advisors as their faculty, and I was at the Atlanta airport, and a crowd gathered, and they said, "Oh, it's Dr. White," and I they started telling me about these television shows that they had seen, and I didn't remember some of them, but they were telling me how they had made some changes to their diets and how they were exercising more and so forth and so. Even in Nashville, I went to Nashville with my granddaughter, and I was recognized in a restaurant up in Nashville. So it was so satisfying to do that show, and it ended during the pandemic. They sold the
Oh,
stage,
sure. Yeah,
and because you can't, takes about 18 people to do a show,
right.
and it was just so satisfying all those years to bring this research to the public, and it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it.
So you were just on for a short segment and talked
Yes.
about updating new news about aging or being old
Yes.
or, huh,
Yes. And it was topics that we're discussing right now. And so these viewers were armed with this current research that they could put into action that day.
huh,
And I think
amazing.
that's why it was such a big hit.
Sure. And as we said before, nobody really talks about it. There aren't any shows that talk about aging.
No, no,
And the
aging
game
is
is,
really kind of a taboo topic still. There's ageism is so prevalent in the American culture, and it's still not really polite to talk about it. Like at a dinner party, we don't talk about religion and politics. Well, we usually don't talk about aging either.
well, that's true, unfortunately. Unfortunately, people tend to pigeonhole you as being old or elderly. And I have
Right.
people, I have a vacation rental division of part of my company, and we often have people who call and say, does this condominium have stairs or does it have an elevator? Why are you asking? Well, because my mom is elderly and she needs to have an elevator. And I always want to ask them, right, wink, wink, right, sure. How old is your mom? Oh, she's 62. Said,
Oh,
trust me, your mom's
right.
not elderly at 62. No.
Right.
So
So
I do find
it's
that
the
very
grown
interesting.
right. It's the grown child. That's their perception of their parent being frail, but they're
Yes,
not usually
but they're
not frail.
no, no, no. And with so many of us living older, living longer, and still being vibrant and these ages, there needs to be an adjustment in the thought process of people who um, who are associated with older adults.
Right. And there's a lot of assumptions. So they often assume that, oh, well, if you're 70, oh, well, then we must have the elevator or we must have the stairs. Well,
Sure.
I'm in my 70s and I'm in a pool Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with one of my buddies is 94 years old that
Is that
swims
right?
with me,
Yeah,
and he's doing just fine. He's keeping up with everybody else.
sure.
So yeah, but this is really back to ageism, and it's the assumption that if you're a certain age, then you have limitations.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, that is the case, unfortunately. So
Yep.
in creating this show, I wanted to have a show that would do exactly what we're doing today, is talk about these issues, to be a resource for someone who is the caretaker of an aging parent, has an aging parent. They don't know what to do. My mom lives in New York, or I live in New York. My mom's in California. I don't know what to do. I haven't seen her in 10 years. What do I need to do? So I want to be a resource for that person, but didn't want to just talk about being old. So I thought that the name Always Ageless is something that we could build a community so people could relate to that, and not about what to do when you're old, because I don't think I'm old.
Right. Well, I love what you're doing with this show because you're breaking down barriers. And so you're addressing this issue of ageism, and what you're identifying is ableism. We're able to do a lot.
I like that word.
Yes, ableism. And so people can tune in or they can watch, and they find resources for caregiving or for strategies for living a disability-free life,
Mhm.
and just have a better experience with aging, and they can put it into action.
Mhm. Yeah, and my mom's cardiologist is goes to Italy every summer. And this year I asked, we visited him a couple weeks ago, and I said, Dr. Gerald, why aren't you in Italy this summer? He said, oh, we can't go. And I said, well, why can't you go this summer? He said, no, he's my age. He says, my wife has to take care of her mom. So it just hit me that, yes, we all are in this situation, right? We all have a senior. Here he is, even at his age, he's having to adjust his annual vacation schedule because he has to take care of an aging parent.
Right.
So it's
It's really,
we have kind of a saying in our group, Dr. White, we all have a senior, right? We
we
all have a
do.
senior.
And I no longer have a senior. My husband died just a year ago.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
I no longer have a senior, but I have friends who are seniors and alone like I am, and we all look out for each other.
Sure.
So I still have seniors in my life. And by the way, that's by choice.
Yes.
I want seniors in my life. My life is better with seniors in my life. Now I have younger friends too, but yeah, I actually cultivate these relationships with my older friends.
Yes. And I'm seeing a lot of things like there's travel groups for older people, and there's a group called Thrive that you might find fascinating, and you buy the goggles that you can then play games online,
Oh, right.
and it's all for older people, and they have like a gardening club and a wine club. I know we're going to talk about wine here in just a minute. We have
Yes.
a wine club, and they have all of these things, and they can interact with each other. So here's people all over the world who can interact with each other at any age and any stage. And so these
Oh,
things are
wow.
always being created. And some of that, as you know, is called age tech also. So
Right.
we don't want
I
to get
love
off on
that.
that subject, but
And then there's another group called the Ageless Traveler. And there's another group called Road Scholar.
Scholar, yes, I'd love to go on one of their trips. Have you worked with them?
I have been on 6 trips.
You have.
Yes, and 2 as a single and the rest with my husband, and they're fabulous. They are according to activity level and budget. It is just wonderful, and they plan everything out. And these are trips to you can go on an African safari, or you can
Mhm.
go on a trip, to the Rockies or someplace in the States. So I would urge people, if they want to start traveling, it doesn't matter if you have a companion or not. There are lots of resources out there.
And I think even we put our own selves in the box of saying, well, I don't want to go on a trip with old people,
Right.
right? But I think some
Right.
of them, like Road Scholar, aren't most of them still pretty active adults?
Yes, they have different levels of activity. So some of these trips are, you have to be able to be mobile.
Right.
Um, but some of them are for people who are really fit. But there's a little key that you can do your search when you do your search, and it'll show you the activity level. So you don't go whitewater rafting. Like, that would
Sure.
just kill me.
Yeah,
But
I wouldn't
so
do that.
I'm not going to do the whitewater rafting, but I am going to go to New York City in
Sure,
January.
sure. Well, my bucket list still is an African safari. So let's talk about your teaching. You do a lot of research. You are a teacher, you're a professor. So tell me, when did you teach on a college level? What do you teach, and who's your ideal student, and what's your ideal topic? What do you like to teach?
Well, I taught for 14 years as a professor at 3 different universities, and these were all virtual. I taught at Capella University, Walden University, and the University of Liverpool in England. And I taught gerontology courses, and I taught advanced doctoral research. My department chair at Walden found out that I really am a research expert in addition to being a gerontologist.
Mhm.
And so I was teaching those, the introduction to doctoral research. And I loved teaching those courses. So the aging and the research. Now at the University of Liverpool, I taught in their public health program. And many of my students were actually physicians.
Really?
Yes, living in developing countries, and they needed to tag on a public health degree to their medical degree because a lot of these developing countries don't have public health.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know, Uganda is vastly different, for example, than the United
Yes.
States. So I found that fascinating. Now, my typical student, they were adults. Many of them were mid-career, uh, wanting to get into more research, and a lot of them wanted to get a promotion. They were high achievers because I taught only doctoral students.
Sure.
And
I
so
see.
it was very satisfying to work with these students. And many of my favorite students are still interacting with me on LinkedIn,
Oh,
and they're
that's
all
nice.
doctors and they're achieving great things. And I'm so proud of them.
Yeah, it must be great to follow up with them and see what they do.
It is.
Is there any such thing as normal aging?
Yes.
And
Normal
what, if
aging.
so, what is that?
Yes. Okay. Normal aging is, like I said before, cognitive slowing. Okay. So the memories are in the brain. The retrieval is slower because the brain is older, but they're still in there. And so that's normal. Gaining a little bit of weight, that's normal. Change in muscle tone is normal. So where people get tripped up and where they start denying aging and not liking the aging process is when they want to have the same muscle tone they had when they were 30 years old. And that
Sure.
is absolutely impossible. You know, even Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, he still looks really good, but his muscle is different now than he was when he was Mr. America or he was in the movies. But
Yes.
he's still fit and he still looks good. So you have to accept these changes. You know, hair loss is normal, gray hair is normal. Um, it's the accepting of these changes that is so hard for many people. But it's something that you can't deny, you can't stop. Aging is not a disease. Aging is across all species.
Yes, it is. It seems to be something we have trouble avoiding.
You can't avoid it. It just is going to happen.
Do you
And
believe that aging begins at birth?
no, aging does not begin at birth. And
It's not really.
the science is indisputable. Aging begins in the womb. And we have found that these longitudinal studies have shown that this 9 months in the womb is critical because that's where we get our nourishment. Okay, the nourishment comes from the mother. And so now we know that you don't smoke and you don't drink and you don't do drugs when you're pregnant because that can harm the baby, the developing baby. And this is called the fetal origins hypothesis, and you can look it up online. It is it's not discussed very often. It's more for people like me who were deep into the research. But to kind of compress it here with to answer your question, um, when the baby does not get the proper nourishment, either from a very young mother who is still a developing teen, or just from malnutrition or bad nutrition,
Yeah.
then that baby is born typically underweight, sometimes premature, and so that baby has a deficit in their metabolic development. So they are predisposed to diabetes type 2 and cardiovascular disease later in life. So that 9 months is the most critical time in our entire life.
Well, it sounds like it. And
Yes, it is.
so when someone says to you, oh, you must have good genes, which I hear often because my dad died the day before his 99th birthday, and my mom is 104, will be 105 October 18th. So people often say to me, oh, you must have great genes. And I say, I hope so. But is
I
that
agree
true?
with that.
Is
And
that
that
true?
is going to serve you well, because all of these aging studies, these longitudinal studies, and by the way, when I say longitudinal, I mean they're occurring over many decades. So
Okay.
those types of studies have a far more validity than an anecdotal study that's taken place over many months. So anyway, back to your question. The centenarian studies, where they examine the lives of people who have achieved at least the age of 100, they have found that their good habits in life have served them well, but so many of these centenarians have older parents who also attained the age of 100. So there is a genetic component. So you're very lucky to have these parents who have achieved long life.
Yes, yes, I am in a lot of different ways. I have so much that I still want to talk to you about, but unfortunately, we only have this hour. But I want to ask you about something that I heard or I read, something about a village that you were involved with.
Yes, yes. It's here where I live in Diamond Head, Mississippi. Now we're a small community of 9,000 people. We're an older demographic, and I relocated here 14 months ago, and we were just starting this new type of a senior center. It's a grassroots movement. And if you can Google Village to Village, it is a model of senior center. Volunteers run these programs, and it's for the advancement of successful aging and social contacts. And there are so many resources. You can go online if you want to get this started in your community. Go online, look up villagetovillage.com,
Okay.
and you're going to be blown away with how many resources there are. Now, Diamond Head, Mississippi, we took it one step further. We wanted to be designated memory or dementia friendly. And you can look that up too. Again, so many resources, dementia friendly communities. We had to apply, and there are two other aging experts here in the community. We applied, and it took many, many months, but we finally were designated memory friendly Diamond Head. We were the first community in Mississippi to achieve that designation. So then what do you do with it? Then you train the first responders, and then you train the community merchants to interact with people in the community who have some cognitive decline.
And how do they do that? Can you give us an example?
Yes, well, an example is if there's a person that has an obvious, deficit, and you don't just brush them off or tell them to go away or be mean to them. And I actually witnessed this in the post office yesterday.
Oh, what happened?
An older man, he was a little disoriented. He had locked his keys in
Oh,
his car, and
oh,
he was panicking, and he was kind of frantic. Well, the postal clerk working the window stopped everything and he said, okay, look, just a minute, I'm going to help you. And he
Oh,
called a locksmith and
oh, nice.
explained the situation and told the man to please go sit down, everything's going to be okay. So this is how we do it. We want to be able to interact with people who are older and make this community good for everyone. And at the same time, while we're doing this, we're breaking down ageism and we're removing some of those barriers.
And what other things do they do in the city, so to speak? Like in a retail store, what kind of things can they do?
Well, for example, there is a barber shop that has on Thursdays, I think it's Thursdays, that's their dementia friendly day. And
Oh, how
so
fun.
it's instead of having the loud like rock music that's going on in there all the time,
Uh-huh.
they don't have the music and they have an extra person in there to help them check in, because normally you would walk in and you would go right to the laptop. Well, some of these people don't know how to use a laptop. And so there's people in there to help them. And it's that type of going the extra mile and knowing how to interact that makes it a better place to live for everybody of any age.
Yes, and it must make the patron or the customer feel so much more welcome and comfortable.
Exactly. And so you would want to live in a place like that.
Yes,
Yes.
I would. Something else I don't want to miss today, and there's so much more we can talk about. I would like to have another episode and let's talk about the village to village. I'm going to research this and I would love to
Okay.
talk about your work there and how you brought
Okay.
that to be. But I do want to talk today about your other part of your life I've noticed, which is being an author.
Right.
Tell
Yes.
us,
I,
how
I
did you
wrote a
become an author?
Well, I've written a couple of books. I just finished my third book. These are novels, by the way. Well, my husband got sick in 2018. He became
Oh,
seriously ill. He was
oh,
sick for years. He was sick until August of last year when he died.
oh, bless his heart.
He had surgeries and his cancer had come back, and it was just one thing after another, and he was just sick most of that time. And so I was his caregiver and it was a wonderful experience. But the burnout, I started experiencing burnout and
Yes.
I sometimes I couldn't get away. And so what I did is I just started writing and I started writing fiction. I found this old screenplay I'd written in my undergrad days and I dusted that off and I thought, well, I'll play around with this. And I realized that the writing was my own form of respite care.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And now we know from the research, and this is kind of new recent research, that a caregiver only needs 15 to 20 minutes away from their caregiving duties to really come away revived. You don't
Really,
need the whole day. You 15
really.
to 20 minutes. And so this is what I was doing. I was catching a few minutes here and there, and I created this whole fictional world with my characters that I developed and this whole fictional, uh, you know, plot, all these plots. And there was also the first book, which is historical fiction. There was also an element of research there. And I did research. For example, part of the book took place in Las Vegas. Well, I've never been to Vegas. So I just did research and I tapped into these historical websites. A
Uh-huh.
lot of states and municipalities have these repositories that are just heaping with historical data, and I was able to access that. And writing those books really saved me.
Just gave you enough of a break to be able to do that, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
And did you finish both of them while your husband was alive?
Yes. And I actually started the third book while I was grieving after he died. He just died 1 year ago. And
Oh,
I was grieving. And so it also helped me through that because during that grieving process, we were married 43 years.
um,
And during that grieving process, some days I couldn't even read I could only look at pretty pictures, but I found that I could write a paragraph here and there and I could escape into this fictional world. So for me, it's been very therapeutic.
Well, good for you. So we will have, and are they alike, or is one a sequel to the other? Are they completely
No,
different?
they're all standalone. The first one is historical fiction. The second one is urban fantasy, and the third one is what's called synthesized fiction. So it's a memoir that has narrative and some fiction thrown in.
And do you have a favorite?
Well, my first book,
Always.
yeah, that's my baby.
Oh, oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm anxious to take a look at them, and I'm sure we can put them on the screen so that our viewers can see. They're available on Amazon,
Yes, and I write under the name Lucky Ringwood.
right?
Because I wanted a firewall. I'm still working as a gerontologist and researcher, and I wanted a firewall. But then a colleague at this recent conference we went to, I was telling her about my books and why I wrote them and how it helped me with my caregiving burnout. And she said, "This is Dr. Ann Williford." She said, "You need to share this with people." And I was hesitant to do it. So I'm sharing it with you first
Oh,
today.
thank you.
The first time I've spoken about my writing in my gerontological circles.
Oh, that's great. Well, we're so glad that you shared that with us, and we'll be sure to post them. So anyone who's interested can go to Amazon and find them. I'm sure they're great books, great stories.
Thank you.
We have about 1 minute left. Is there anything that you would like to share with our guests? Anything that you wish would change in the world of aging that you hope that you can contribute to? Or are you doing these great things like the village and you're writing?
Well, I would like to tell the listeners and the viewers to get involved in aging, even if it's just reducing ageism and learning how to be kinder to older adults and learning to appreciate them, because this is a huge segment of the population. Now, by 2030, all the boomers are going to be over 65, and
Yes.
that cohort of millennials is right around the corner.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an older population. Learn to love and appreciate older people.
Great advice. Great advice. And how can our listeners and viewers find you?
My
Is it all
website.
right if they reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
I do make a lot of referrals every day. So my website, this is easy, janvwhite.com.
So that's Jan, V as in Victor, White.com.
Yes.
Great. That's wonderful. Dr. White, thank you for being with us today. It has been my pleasure. I enjoyed meeting you in Arizona, and I knew right away I would want to have you as a guest on our Always Ageless show. We want to ask
Thank
everyone to
you.
please remember to come back again next week, next Monday at 3 o'clock. Always Ageless, the show where we dive into the vibrant, dynamic world of living life fully as a mature adult. And it's also a resource for the aging children, the adult children of aging parents. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.